Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where it is in the world you're tuning in from today. My name is Amanda. I'm the managing director here at Stage 32, and I wanted to welcome you to today's Stage 32 Next Level webinar with John Stahl. And for those of you who don't know John, he's currently the script coordinator for the Emmy Award and actually multiple award-winning show Veep, which stars Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And he has been working in the industry for, I think, over 10 years now. And he's going to be talking to you about what it's like to break down expectations of being in a comedies room and then what happens once you get there. So I'm really excited to have him here this morning to spend some time with you in the Stage 32 community. And then for those of you who are joining us for the first time, just to let you know, this will be an interactive webinar. So if you have any questions for John, I mean, come on, you've got this amazing person who's working on one of the top shows today in front of you. Please bring your questions. And the way that you will do that is inside the questions box. So if I could have everybody type in if they write comedy TV or comedy features, if they could type that into the questions box, then I can get a sense of if we have TV writers or feature writers, or even if you write more than comedy, type that in the box just so we have an idea of who's here in the room. And then also just to let you know, John's going over a lot of information today, like a lot of information. So I just want you to be prepared that if you feel like he's going through something too fast or you feel like you missed it, don't worry. We can clarify during Q&A, but we're also recording this, so you'll be able to watch this on demand and go back and reference it for up to a year. So, all right, so before we get started, it looks like, actually, John, it looks like almost everyone in the room writes comedy TV.
Great.
We have a drama feature writer here just interested to learn about comedy, which is great. We have some stand-up comedians in here. It looks like we have oh, this is interesting. We have a cinematographer here. That's wonderful. Glad to have you here. It looks like we have another drama feature writer. This is great. We have a sci-fi TV pilot writer. And majority TV comedy. So, but that's great. I'm glad that we have other professions here too. So that'll be fun. All right, well, John, I'm going to leave it for you to go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Amanda. I appreciate it. As Amanda said, my name is John Stahl. Worked in entertainment for the last decade. And for about a third of that, I've been in the writer's room as a script coordinator or writer's assistant. I've worked for an NBC show. I've worked at Nickelodeon, and I'm currently on the hit series Veep, which is always an interesting experience, a lot of fun. I love the writers. It's a great place to be. So I am very busy. I just came off of a very long shoot week where we were shooting out in Malibu. It's always a great time, and I'm really happy to have you all here to kind of take some notes from what I do. This is a course designed to introduce you to the world of television comedy writers' rooms and the role of writer's assistant, script coordinator, writer's room production assistant. It's designed to help you learn how the room operates, how the job works, how to break into the job, and what to do after you've already gotten in. So there's a lot of material to cover, so I guess we're just gonna jump right in and start you guys off. Real quick, here we go. Just some general information on a writer's room. I'll introduce what a writer's office is, what it's about, the key players, kind of the day-to-day, the hours and the pay, which I know a lot of people are interested in learning about, and why it's such a coveted job and why everyone wants to be there. Let's see here. Start off here. What is a writer's office? Simply put, it's a gathering of writers working on a show. It can be on a studio lot, in a temporary office space, in a writer's home, even in a living room set that will actually be on camera. And this is something that I've done a lot of times on the set of Veep. We'll be shooting a scene, and we're actually shooting a living room set, and we'll need to do a rewrite on set, and we'll actually commandeer that area and start writing right there on set in the place where they're about to shoot. Some other people involved in the in a writer's office. It's not just writers. There's some combination of the writers. There can be a production team in the same office. I've even seen post-production working out of writers' offices, especially if the showrunner needs quick access to post-production. It'll be set up in the same office, so you can just go from his office into the post-production office, look at cuts, look at dailies, stuff like that. Very often you'll see prepping directors will work out of the writer's office. So, you know, if there's anything that the producers need to run by the director or new changes that are coming out, you can just run that right over to the director's office. Typically, in a writer's room, there's a table with chairs around it. Sometimes there's couches, other seats. You know, I've sat in those big cushy like lounge chair things before in writers' rooms. There's always whiteboards and there's always TVs so that the writers can always look at notes that are being typed up or, you know, script changes and script rewrites that are happening on the spot. Let's see, where are we? Okay, here we go. Key players, the showrunner. Very, very important position. Obviously, as the name implies, they run the show. All major decisions about the show and about the room go through him. So that's the top level person on a show. I mean, an executive producer will often be a line producer or a star, such as the case with Veep. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is actually the star and an executive producer. She makes a lot of top level decisions alongside the showrunner, who is the head writer. So that is the importance of the showrunner, is all of the big decisions about the show go through him or her. A writing co-EP, this is the second in command individual. This person answers to the showrunner. They'll typically run the room when the showrunner is on set. And they are kind of the lieutenant to the showrunner. So, you know, if the showrunner is too busy to address something, they'll often pass it off to their co-EP to kind of help them out and support them. Co-EP, co-executive producer, executive producer, producer, line producer. There might be a team of 2 to 3 executive producers, production managers, production supervisors to kind of help with the day-to-day, to address the day-to-day of production. So they're in charge of, you know, working closely with the directors, with, you know, all the major department heads to make sure the show happens and, you know, arrange for vendors to get the cameras there on time and what have you. So that is a very, very important position that also works very closely with the showrunner. A script coordinator will often work very closely with the executive producer, the line producer, the production manager, because things are always changing in a script and you want those changes to be relayed to the production staff. So let's say there's a new props element that comes in. Very often, as soon as something gets typed on the page, you know, the script coordinator will be there to inform production or the props department that that change needs to occur on the day when they're actually shooting. In the room, you'll also have assistants and support staff. So a showrunner's assistant is very typical. Producer's assistant for the actual producer, and production PAs. So PAs that are actually in the production office. You definitely want to be good to the production PAs because their job is very, very hard and they work really long hours and they don't get paid well. And also they can help you out a lot and they can be your best friends. And many of the production PAs are some of my closest friends. So I have a very good relationship with them. The day-to-day, it varies a lot. So it really depends on the show. Sometimes the hours are steady and short. Sometimes you start late and end late. Sometimes it's a notes heavy day where you're just sitting there typing all day and your wrists are tired and you just have to keep typing. And sometimes writers are off on script. And so there's not a whole lot to do at the office except for, you know, support the writers that are there. Very often you'll find yourself on the keys, as I call it, for a final draft rewrite. If a script is coming in and they need to rewrite it, typey. That's a lot of the day-to-day, but there's so many more aspects of it that will just depend on the kind of office you're in. The the hours and pay. The pay is not the best in a writer's office unless you're actually a writer. I've been in the profession for more than 3 years now, and it's still not that much better than what I was making at the start of that period. There's a union now that 871 has IATSE 871 has stepped in. They're improving pay. They're improving the minimum number of hours that people work and the maximum number of hours that people work, obviously. Salaries will increase gradually over the next few years. And they're also adding things like MPT-PH healthcare, which is some of the best healthcare that exists. So if you come into a writer's office as a script coordinator or writer's assistant, you are guaranteed to work towards the hours that are required to get this really great healthcare. Not all shows are covered by the agreement just yet, but they're working on it. So things are getting a lot better since 871 has joined with script coordinators and writer's assistants. The hours are really, they can be pretty easy. I've heard of shows that have easy and short hours, but I've never experienced that myself. I've been on 3 big shows, and the hours are grueling. On more than one of those experiences, I've pulled several full 24-hour days in the office during a season. I've slept in the writer's office before. I have taken a shower on the lot. In the writer's office, script coordinators and writer's assistants are the first ones in, and we're the last ones out. We're there to hand out drafts to writers at the start of the day, and we're there to distribute completed scripts to cast and crew at the end of the day. The hours are not for the faint of heart. You have to kind of be committed to it and really want to be there. So it can be tough. Why everyone wants the job? That's a very good question. Based on the hours and the pay, you'd expect like, what's in it for me? But for a lot of people, it's an opportunity to break into being a paid writer. A lot of people can climb that ladder and get from writer's assistant to script coordinator to staff writer. And that's the big jump from script coordinator to staff writer, where you are essentially getting a 500% raise, and your job is to make, like, actually pitch good stuff for a living and to write for a living, which is kind of the goal of everyone, I imagine, that's in this webinar. For others, it's an opportunity to put their own writing in front of professional writers and get really constructive feedback. I, for one, have experienced that firsthand with a lot of the writers of Veep. They are more than willing to read your stuff, and they're more than willing to give you really constructive and great notes on your material, which is, I mean, a benefit in and of itself. Still others just love being in a writer's room. I can speak to that personally. Watching the creative process unfold and learning from the pros is one of the best parts of the job. You actually are in a room and you're learning from these people some of whom have been doing it for 20, 25 years. It's also just really fun. There's a lot of laughter that goes on in a comedy writer's room. It's part of the job. Very often, it's actually part of the job to laugh. You know, if you're on stage and they're doing a run through, or if they're doing a table read, your job is to add to the laughter that's there, because you want to boost up what people think of the script, and you want to people to believe in their heart that this is really, really funny stuff. Sometimes even if it's not, but that's a whole different story altogether. I'll get into some info on the job of writer's assistant. We'll cover what a writer's assistant is, what a script coordinator is, what a writer's PA is, and what's the difference between comedy and drama briefly. That's that could be a whole thing altogether, but we'll get into that. First of all, a writer's assistant. The job of a writer's assistant is exactly what it sounds like. You're there to assist the writers in whatever they need, make sure they have whatever supplies or snacks or whatever they request, print out notes and scripts and outlines for them. You're there to take notes, work in final draft, proofread scripts and outlines. You also a lot of phone calls to answer, so you're going to answer phones and roll calls a lot of the time. And you also cover for the script coordinator when they're too busy to do something. A script coordinator, simply put, a script coordinator in a comedy writer's room is the most senior writer's assistant. They handle all of the duties of a writer's assistant, and on top of that, more high-level stuff. So distribution and coordinating with production in regards to script changes, and offering the showrunner feedback if a story beat or line of dialogue doesn't make sense or reads weird. That's actually something I've done before where, you are kind of the bottom of this pyramid, but you're still there to cover for the showrunner in case something doesn't make sense in the story, or you've already said a line before, or the wording sounds weird. It's up to you to bring that stuff up and let them know that you said the word, you said the word maybe 3 times in one page, and then they might want to think about restructuring some of the language. So it's nerve-wracking to have to go to a showrunner and claim to be the expert on something, but that's part of your job, is to actually bring that sort of stuff up. On a lot of the script coordinator jobs I've worked, I was tasked with creating a very brief outline to give to the writers and showrunner, kind of like 10,000-foot view of the script. So really breaking down a 30, 40, or 50-page script into like a 3-page document that very briefly describes each scene, so that a showrunner or a writer can really quickly glance and see if there's anything in there that can come out. So that's the biggest benefit of doing something like that, is showing them where there are extra scenes that don't need to be there, or if the scene ordering is kind of weird, they'll also look at that and use that to move stuff out. A very big part of the script coordinator's job is to coordinate with the script supervisor or the AD, the assistant director, if there's anything that needs to change in the script to make production team's life easier on set. So that's a big part that I mentioned a bit earlier on, is that a lot of times the AD is the first person to know about any big changes that need to happen, because they'll relay changes to various department heads. So you will work closely with the AD and give them the information that they need to pass on to people if there's anything that's changing in terms of props or makeup or hair or whatever. Script supervisor is also a very important person that you collaborate with and work with. They are in charge of continuity on set. So they are in charge of, making sure that a take is, if a director likes a take, they'll mark that one as a good take, or they'll make sure that someone has their right leg crossed over their left leg, they'll make sure that it's that way in every take. So often if there are changes on the page, you are going to work closely with the script supervisor to make sure they know about those changes and they know how it affects their job. Writer's PA. This is a very important position in the writer's office as well. They generally pick up any slack that they can from the writer's assistant and script coordinator, depending on how good they are at this stuff and how long they've been doing it. They can actually take on, for instance, we had our writer's PA helping us out with the 10,000-foot view, the kind of brief outline that we wrote. So we would give them the script, say, break this down into these minute, just the big details about the scene, and send it back to us if we're kind of running late and we don't have much time and we can only do half of the brief outline. We'll send it to our writer's PA to kind of do the other half, and we'll piece it together that way and Frankenstein it. So it is an important job that actually has some really big responsibilities. Obviously, there's lunch, doing any kind of runs that the writers need, making sure the writer's room is tidy and the table is clean, because writers are known to be fairly messy. Doing grocery runs for snacks and basic office essentials, supplies. Make the coffee every day. That's also very important, and sometimes 2 times a day, because the writers will need that midday boost. A lot of times they're answering the phones because the writer's assistant and the script coordinator are both in the room, and so they won't have access to the phones, so the writer's PA is going to have to answer those. Bradding and unbradding scripts, that's important. And for anyone who doesn't know, which should be none of you, but for anyone who doesn't know, it's two brads, one on the top, one on the bottom. You don't brad the middle one. So that's a lot of their job is bradding and unbradding is just as important because, you know, if you're putting these scripts in the shredder, you can't brad them because you know, you just can't because it'll mess up the shredding machine, whatever it is. And then on top of that, just any kind of like any extra stuff that the script coordinator asks. If you're a writer's PA and the script coordinator asks you to, you know, help with an outline or help with another task that they're working on, step up because, you know, one day you might be in that position and you'll need the same help from your writer's PA. How things differ in the drama world. If you're coming from drama, things are a little bit different in comedy land. Script coordinators in drama aren't in the room. They are typically in the office, but they're rarely in the room. The writer's assistant actually takes over the script coordinator writer's assistant job in the room while taking notes or doing rewrites, but the script coordinator is mainly there for, you know, script changes and publishing and clearance requests and all sorts of boring stuff that I wouldn't want to do personally. The script coordinators and writer's assistants are essentially different jobs on a drama, whereas in a comedy room, aside from a few additional duties and greater responsibility, writer's assistants and script coordinators are basically interchangeable. Essentially, a script coordinator is just a more senior writer's assistant in a comedy room, whereas in drama, they're fundamentally different jobs. What the jobs aren't. You're not a writer. That's one thing that you should just be aware of when you take the job. If you assert yourself, yes, absolutely, you can get pitches into scripts, and if they like you enough, you may even be assigned a script of your own. But don't expect to be writing full time as a script coordinator or writer's assistant. That's just not one of the you know, official job duties of those roles. You're not in production. It's not a production position, ideally. The production team on your show should do things like taking care of production's needs. So you as a script coordinator, writer's assistant, writer's PA, are devoted to the writers. You can help out, you can pitch in where you can with production's needs if they should need an extra hand, but you should not be doing their jobs because they should have their own department, they should have their own help. You are devoted to the writers, you stay with them. You're not a script supervisor, which is a good thing because being a script supervisor is really, really hard. It's not your job to catch inconsistencies on set. If there's something, obviously, if you see something, I've done this before, if you see something that is not right on set and it's not consistent or there's something amiss, bring it up to the script supervisor or bring it up to the showrunner and let them know because you'll be, you know, applauded as a hero. But it's not your job to catch inconsistencies. If there's something that doesn't make sense on the page, that's on a script coordinator. And if you see a consistency problem on set, just point it out to the others, like I said. You're not a producer, so don't kid yourself. That's not what you're doing. A note on IATSE 871. There's certain protected things. I think I went over this. There's certain protected things that come with the job: a guaranteed salary, health insurance on covered shows. Also, very important rules that dictate turnaround hours and weekend work. So I think the new rules are, if you're holding for the weekend or you plan on helping out the showrunner over the weekend, you're guaranteed 4 hours per day that you're holding. So they can't just say, put a hold on those days, but we're not going to pay you for those. If you're putting a hold on those days and expecting like a script to come in or something, you are guaranteed 4 hours minimum. And if you work longer than that, obviously you work longer than that. You put that on your time card. And if you have any questions about getting a job as a script coordinator or after getting a job as a script coordinator or writer's assistant, contact the union. They're a great resource and they've been very helpful so far. Perhaps the most important and exciting thing that people have come here for, how to get a job in the writer's office. It is what we're all here for, but how does one do it? That's a question that I asked myself very early on in the process when I was in production, when I was working as a production assistant. I wanted to take the next step into the writer's room. And I will say it's not an easy question to answer. It's um, it's a lot about who you know. It's a lot about where you're coming from and what you're doing. Um, so, but there's no one path for anyone. Just like there's no one path to becoming a writer. There's no one path in getting a job in a writer's office. Um, let's see. It's a lot about who you know, to be honest with you. Most jobs in the industry are filled by people who know the person hiring or know someone who the person hiring knows, or knows someone who knows the person who's doing the hiring. You get the idea. Friends and family are great initial ends. You know them, you trust them, they trust you. Find an uncle who knows of a studio head, or a long lost friend who knows a high level TV writer producer, and talk to them about making an introduction, because that will get your foot in the door. That will get your face in front of someone who's doing the hiring. Colleagues and work contacts have been very helpful. I've found that a more solid, lasting connection comes through work contacts. If you've proven to someone that you can do a job, any job, that someone is more likely to want to work with you again in whatever capacity they can. After having spent 2 seasons on Veep, every single writer on the show, I think, likes me and would love to bring me on their next show, wherever that may be. Production is also a really good resource. If you work in production, you can make those kind of contacts that help you get a job in the writer's office. The production office very often has a very close relationship with the writer's room. If the production office is in the same building or the same floor, production PAs get to interact with the writers on a regular basis. If they know your face and where the producer can vouch for you, you vastly increase your chances of getting moved into the writer's office. Networking, this is a very big way to work your way in as well. Go to events, introduce yourself to people online through professional networking sites like Stage32, for instance, that's my one Stage32 plug for the whole webinar here. But make sure to ask, reach out to script coordinators, ask to buy them a cup of coffee or breakfast or something like that. And feel free to offer to buy me a cup of coffee or breakfast. I'll take it. I'm not too proud for that. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. You really do. At the same time, you have to be okay with being told no. There isn't enough time in the day for me to take every free breakfast and coffee meeting that I'm sure is coming my way, as delicious and free as that may be. But keep plugging away. Don't be afraid to reach out to people, even people in power. You'd be surprised at how many of them are willing to go to bat for you when you don't have those kind of connections that a lot of other people do. If you still need an industry job after all of those, avenues have been explored, you don't have any friends or family in high places, just do what I did when I first came to Los Angeles. I didn't have the kind of contacts that could get me work, so I emailed every major commercial production company in the LA area. There were about 300 of them, and 2 of them got back to me, and I got a job at one. The people that worked like me, and my address book started growing, and I started meeting more people and making more contacts, and that kind of one thing led to another. And you can always rely on dumb luck, but as it's been said, luck favors the prepared. So you make those contacts, you work hard, you meet as many people as you can. Sometimes it just takes a lucky break to get in. It took me 7 years working in production before I finally found my way in, and only because my best friend was a script coordinator on an NBC show. Do not give up. That really bears repeating. Do not give up. It is a marathon, not a sprint, and it really does favor those who put themselves out there and take the risks that are necessary to kind of get in the door. A lot of getting the job depends on who you are and how you behave, both in your current job and when you actually land in the writer's office. Writer's rooms aren't for the faint of heart or the terminally shy. Getting a job in a writer's room is just as much about being the right type of personality for a writer's room. Be personable. Don't stare at your shoes when talking to someone. You have to know how to hold a conversation, to engage someone in a friendly, not overbearing way. You'd be shocked at how many people have difficulty with this. Don't ask a writer personal questions on the first day of the job, please. That's not something that they love to hear. You establish trust by starting slow and then going deeper as you get to know each other. And I'm not going to teach you how to be a normal human being. That's an entirely separate class that I'm sure a lot of you have also signed up for. You have to be respectful. These are professional writers, some with 20, 30 years of professional writing and producing experience. Chances are they know more than you. Respect them, respect their privacy, respect their work. Don't think you know more than them, because even if it seems that way initially, you really don't, because they've had all that experience. It's important to be funny. It is like, people in writers' rooms love making jokes and making other people laugh. That's why they're there. If you're naturally inclined to make jokes, make them. Hopefully you'll get a laugh. With the asterisk and the caveat, don't test your stand-up routine with the writers. You're probably not as funny as they are, and if you're too jokey, it comes off as desperate, and that's no one likes that. So just be chill. That's another important factor. It kind of ties in with the above. Don't try too hard. That doesn't come off as cool. And keep your stress level under control. Sometimes in a TV writer's room, tensions run high. Sometimes you get snapped at. Sometimes you're under a massive ticking time crunch. Be as chill as possible through all of this, and people will take notice. The climate in the room can get tense. If you're visibly stressed out, you stress out the writers, and that is the opposite of what you want to be doing. It takes some amount of nerves and years of practice, but I've mastered the art of seeming super cool under loads of pressure, even though my heart is doing this. And the writers appreciate that. They take notice. They like it when you can keep your cool. Be on top of your shit. Don't neglect your professional duties because you're palling around with the writers or working on your own material. Do the job, do it well. Try to visualize your boss's job. And this is a very high level thing. It's not like an introductory piece of information. Try to visualize your boss's job. Anticipate problems that they might encounter. That means looking down the road a bit, thinking like they would think, trying to run the show in your head, anticipating how you would imagine how you would want it to be run, and help your boss achieve that goal. If you have a solution at the ready when shit goes down, you'll be seen as some sort of a psychic genius. I've done this before, and it feels really, really good. The boss asks for something, and you hand it to him without even taking a second. You already have what he asks for in your hands, and you give it to him. He's like, "Oh, wow, how did you know what that was? That was like magic." It's not magic. It's just anticipating the needs of someone who has a really hard job, really hard and stressful, and really busy job. And if you can kind of think like the showrunner, that will make your job easier, because you'll have all those things at the ready, and they will appreciate that. Honestly, I try to have as good of a set of mental binoculars as I can. I try to look for obstacles on the road ahead, and I try to patch the potholes before we hit them. That's a pretty important aspect of what I do. The nitty gritty, the resume. The thing is, if you don't have any experience in a writer's office, most writer's offices won't hire you. So you may have to take some creative liberties with your CV. If your resume is thin, pad it. everyone's doing it. If you're not, then you're at a competitive disadvantage. Don't lie outright, because they, writers are smart, they can sniff out a lie, but embellish jobs you've done in the past to make it seem like you have more experience or expertise in a writer's room, or if need be, in production. If you know what you're doing, it won't matter. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you won't last 2 seconds in a writer's office anyway. Don't include extraneous shit. Typically, showrunners and producers don't care about you coming in fourth in some obscure semi-annual script contest. They don't care that you wrote a YouTube short that was seen by 10,000 people. They're not hiring a writer. They're hiring someone else. Don't try to sell yourself as a writer when you're looking for a job as a writer's assistant or a writer's PA or script coordinator. Now, that also isn't to say that they don't want to see that you love comedy and you have experience in unique and fun areas of comedy. When we get a resume that includes experience at UCB, for instance, or some other comedy troupe, that's a big plus, like to show that you actually have that love of comedy and places that do that sort of stuff. When in doubt, consult someone who already is a script coordinator or writer's assistant to see what they think of your resume, because they'll give you good notes. All right. Writers' offices are very unique. I'm not lying when I say comedy writers' offices are unlike any other professional environment in the world. They're fun. They're really, really fun. These are professional comedy writers, and they're really funny. Laughing is a good portion of your job, as I mentioned. Comedy writers are typically very nice too, at least in my experience. Maybe attributable to their compulsive desire to be liked, but that's a question for a psychoanalyst. It's serious work. It's not all fun and games. Working in a comedy writer's room is tough. Writers work really hard. They pull long hours to get scripts out before table reads. They rack their brains to address occasionally ridiculous studio notes. And they bring their A game to every day to make a script not only hilarious, but also compelling and screen ready. I like to say an idea is not a story is not a script, and a script is not a show. And a show is also not a good show, necessarily. Writing is hard work specifically because in the end, you have to have created a show, not just a joke or an idea. And that's something that I try and carry with me, not just in my work as a script coordinator and writer's assistant. I try to take that with me in my career in general. I try to remember that, if I come up with an idea that someone else then puts on screen, I don't think, damn, they stole my idea. I think, oh, well, they must have done something to have earned it getting up on screen. And also, everyone has ideas, and very often people have the same ideas, just the collective unconscious dictates that. So don't just, this is just kind of a sidebar, if you're coming up with something, the brilliant part isn't the idea. It's not, people bring dinosaurs back to life and they run amok. That's not Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is the story and the filmmaking and the visual effects and the brilliance of Steven Spielberg's directing. It's so much more than just that nugget of an idea. I'm sure people had that idea before Jurassic Park, but the thing about Jurassic Park is that they did it, and they did it well. So just try and take that with you. Back on track. Writers' rooms are food oriented. That is a big deal. It's a really big deal. They're fueled by food. They're constantly snacking, and lunch is the most important meal of the day. Some writers I've met rival food critics in their obsession with good food. Basically, they're food snobs, and you should make sure to take food as seriously as they do. One of the first pitches you'll make in a writer's room isn't a joke or a story beat. It will be a nearby restaurant that might be a good spot to get lunch. Make sure you maintain a definite no list of places the showrunner or other writers hate, because nothing will annoy writers or a showrunner more than going someplace that they've already said, this place sucks. for lunch. That's very, very, very basic stuff. Writers' rooms have really weird schedules. Sometimes the showrunner gets in at 1 p.m., sometimes they get in at 6 a.m., sometimes they stay 5 hours and call it a day, or sometimes they'll pull a 24-hour all-nighter because there's a table read due the next day and the script has to be completely rewritten, which is something I've experienced a number of times on every show that I've worked on. Be ready to experience crazy hours and roll with the punches because it's really fucking weird. The schedules can get really messed up. A note on late nights. This is very important, so try and take note of this. Never, ever drive your car after a crazy long day or night. Order an Uber and submit the receipt to the production company. I promise production would rather pay 24 bucks to Uber than see their writer's assistant in a car crash on the evening news. If they give you flack for taking a safe ride home, then you need to quit that job as soon as possible and tell an adult at the studio. A dead assistant is worse for a TV show than losing a few bucks. I really mean that. That's very, very important. And it's something that, you know, we've seen it all too often where there have just been, you know, loss of life because of long hours, and it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Back to not so serious. Writers' rooms are unpredictable. You quickly learn to expect the unexpected. The showrunner might have a temper, assistants may get fired. You can't see into the future, but you can do the best job that you can, and don't be surprised by anything because they'll keep on, as soon as you think you've figured it out, they'll throw something new at you. Language. Some of the most salty language you'll hear in a professional setting exists in the writer's room. Feel free to jump in with language of your own, but don't overdo it. It's not like I'm saying fuck every 5 seconds because I work on Veep, although I say it quite a bit. Room politics. There is a very specific pecking order in a writer's office. As far as the hierarchy goes, you should always defer to the showrunner. They call the shots and have the ultimate say of what goes in a script. If anything bumps with production, make sure to communicate with both production and the showrunner to ensure no hurt feelings. Just always, I make it a point to, even if it's a very stressful time and the showrunner is very busy, if I'm unclear about something, I always run it by the showrunner because it's better to have, you know, annoyed him slightly than have something go into a show that he doesn't want and be surprised by it. That's a really bad thing. If you're at the keys during a rewrite, don't type it unless the showrunner signs off on it. That can sometimes be hard to determine. Sometimes it's as subtle as a nod or a laugh, or as direct as a, yeah, write that. So play it by ear and just keep your eyes on the showrunner as to what they actually want to see go on the page. Because other writers will be pitching stuff all over, and you're not going to be typing down every single pitch that comes in. Only if the showrunner gives you the okay. Writers do have other titles from top to bottom, and you know this, or sorry, from bottom to top. Writers, and this might be, I might be a little bit off, kind of in the middle of it, but generally the hierarchy goes staff writer, story editor, executive story editor, co-producer, producer, consulting producer, supervising producer, co-executive producer, and executive producer. You treat all of the writers the same, regardless of their title. That's very important. But also understand that some writers have more senior rankings than others, and thus generally have greater say than others. Of course, this is different for every show, so evaluate when you get there. Room pitches. Let's see. Okay, I'm on the right slide. Room pitches. These are bits that are obviously not for inclusion in the show. Writers have active comedy generation engines, and sometimes they just need to go on a dick joke run for 5 minutes, even though it will never end up in the show. Don't type that shit. It's usually pretty easy to recognize what a room pitch is and what's a real pitch, and tell the difference between the two. So just keep your eyes on what's actually going to end up in the show. There's a lot of shit talking. You'd be surprised. There's some politics and there's some shit talking that goes on. Occasionally, you might witness or encounter writers talking shit about other writers or even the showrunner. I've seen it happen before. This is a trap. It's unprofessional, and no matter how tempting it is, do not get dragged into it. It's not worth the risk of, you know, getting into shit with writers or the showrunner. Writers, assistants, and script coordinators are often privy to sensitive information. Being in the room means that, you know, you'll have this information. You'll know if someone's getting fired before they get fired. You'll know deeply personal secrets that writers share, and often they share it to inform the story or character. You'll know all sorts of really internal stuff, and you have to exercise discretion, not blast it to social media or share even with other departments. You kind of have to stay mum as much as possible if you hear something that you think might be secret. We're about at the halfway point, and I'm going to take a brief intermission bathroom break, and if you'd like to do the same, I would encourage you to. This is not scheduled, but yeah, I do have to hit the restroom for a brief moment, so I'll be right back, and just enjoy looking at this lovely slide of job duties. Oh, it's so interesting.
I love it, John. All right, guys, isn't he great? He's definitely, I told him when we were discussing the webinar, I said, I want the dirty details, not the fluffy, everything's perfect. So I'm really glad that he's getting into all of that with you. And again, just a reminder, please type in your questions in the questions box. And if you guys want to even type in where you're tuning in from, I'd love to see who we have in the room today. Like, what city are you tuning in from? Or if you're from a different country, type in what country you're from. Great. Looks like we've got quite a few people from Los Angeles. We have someone here from Brooklyn. We have someone here from Iowa, Washington, D.C., Austin, Toronto, Brazil. Great to have you here. Another Toronto, Vancouver. They got two Canadian places represented. Great. Another New York, St. Petersburg, Florida. All right, guys, feel free to keep typing in. I've got a question here actually from Stephanie. She asked if she would be able to watch the replay. The answer is yes. I'll be processing the recording and it takes about 48 hours, and I will put it in your Stage 32 account once it's ready. So you can access that by hitting education and then scrolling down and clicking my education. All right, John, everybody's typing in, he's back, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for riffing and keeping them company for the brief duration there.
Yeah, definitely. And you should probably know we've got someone here from Brazil, and we have a couple writers, a few writers actually from Canada, and all over the United States. So
That's
you should
great.
know. Yep.
Terrific. Well, thank you. And let's get back into it and discuss the job duties. This is probably the really dry part of the presentation, but you know, it's also important because you learn how to actually do the job. There are several components to the job of writer's assistant and script coordinator. There is clerical, administrative, set work. I mean, this is kind of just my way of breaking it down. Clerical, administrative, set work, custodial, creative, and technical. Some of these get their own sections later, so we'll skip over them here and then just kind of like dive into that part in a full long section later. Clerical, what does that mean? So this is primarily for writer's assistant and script coordinator, but the writer's PA also does some clerical, helps out with some of the clerical work. So first things first, notes. This is a really big one. You're going to be taking notes, lots and lots and lots of notes. All told, I've taken thousands of pages of notes in my career. Here are a few quick pointers on the process. First, type fast, which is kind of obvious. Practice typing quickly however you can. Go on online sites and test your typing speed. Use your fingers for typing messages and emails and stuff like that, and really see if you can get fast and accurate. I am 95 words per minute net, and sometimes I can really barely keep up with the writers because there is a lot of like talking and cross talking, and they'll often go pretty fast. And don't feel bad about not getting every single word. A lot of times it's shorthand. A lot of times it is just your own interpretation of what they're saying. But just go as fast as you can, try and keep up. And sometimes it's just a matter of going straight from ears to fingers. So don't edit. Take all of the notes that your showrunner or the writers want you to take, and none of the notes that they don't want you to take. I mean, it takes practice, but ideally it is that process of ear to fingers to keys and on the screen. Even if it bypasses your brain, that's fine, because that's not your job, is to do any editing. Try and type quietly if you can. Don't smack the keyboard. That's one of the first complaints you'll get from a showrunner or writers when you're in a writer's room, is that I once got the comment, "Are you trying to type through the desk?" From a funny showrunner a couple shows back. If you're having trouble, get one of those silicone keyboard condom things that you put on top of your keys. That kind of dampens the sound quite a bit. And they're only about 20 bucks on Amazon. And typically, if they are annoyed by the sound of typing, you can just charge that to production. Have production buy you one of those keyboard condom things that softens the keys, so you don't have to pay anything out of pocket. Hide the screen. This is something that is not very common actually in writers' rooms. Typically, writers want to see notes up on screen. It's somewhat controversial in some writers' offices, but I encourage pushing for it. At Veep, my co-script coordinator and I instituted a fairly strict no notes on the screen policy. This has a couple benefits. One, it's less distracting for the writers. Instead of scrutinizing the text to make sure what they said got typed down, they're thinking of new pitches and saying those pitches. Two, it's less scrutiny is always good in a job that is already so closely scrutinized, such as writer's assistant, script coordinator. The writers at Veep trust us to do our job and get all the notes down. If you can get away with a policy that includes no notes on the screen, it will make your job less stressful and will acclimate the writers to trusting the people they hire. That's a big deal for someone like me who's, I'm just gonna be honest, I'm really good at my job. I know what I'm doing. And at this point, the writers trust me to do my job well. And I come through 99% of the time. It's usually a red flag if the writers need to see you typing every word that they say, which indicates a lack of trust, and that is the start of a really bad working relationship. Use whatever note system the writers and you are comfortable with. Typically, they don't care if you're typing in Google Docs or Microsoft Word, whatever works for everyone. Autosave. This is very important. Google Docs is terrific for this, plus has infinite revision history, which is always a plus. Microsoft Word has an autosave option now in the newest version of Word, so you can turn that toggle on and it'll just autosave everything you type, which is a great feature, because no one likes to type 25 pages of notes and have it all disappear because the software crashed. Script writing. Almost always happens in final draft, which we'll go into a bit later. Brief outline, story breakdown. I told you about this earlier, the 10,000 foot view. It helps the showrunner and writer visualize a script in an easily digestible form. Whiteboard work. This is another big one. Writers' rooms almost always come equipped with dry erase whiteboards. It's the writer's assistant and script coordinator's job to put the text up on the board neatly and cleanly. Occasionally, you'll have to clean up text that the showrunner has put up and transcribed into something legible, because often they'll just do this, that you'll have to interpret into actual words and then write that down on top of it, because very often their handwriting is just so awful. So take any clues you can when they're actually writing on the board. Oftentimes they'll dictate what they're writing so that you don't have to guess what that squiggly line means. Type that down, save it for later. And then when in doubt, use surrounding context for a particularly mysterious piece of chicken scratch text. Practice your block lettering. It's all uppercase handwriting. No, don't do lowercase when you're on the board. It's really easy to just a place to practice would be you can get one of these dry erase markers that I just have handy on my desk. You can write on a window. Everyone has a window at home, you write on a window, you can practice the text there, and that's one way to do it. And I've done that before. I have a desk that's has a piece of glass on top of it, and it's a white background, and I'm actually working off of it right now. I can write on it and then erase it, but I've run out of space on the desk because it's not very big. So when I run out of space, I'll just go to this window that's right in front of me that's giving me this nice lighting and just add extra text there for working on my own material. Next part of the job, administrative, which is primarily for script coordinators. You are going to distribute completed scripts and outlines to the writers, the crew, and cast if needed. Check with production on the distribution protocol. You'll either be using just a simple Gmail kind of email blast, or you'll be working in something called Synchronize, or some other distribution software, which we'll go into later. Typically they have a set method of how they like to do things. Sometimes production is the one that hands off the script to cast, and sometimes you are emailing cast directly, and you're the first point of contact when new script pages come out, for instance. Clearances. This is very boring, but also pretty important. Part of your job is to make sure certain names of people and things are cleared or legal to use on a show. You may do this on your own, but more likely there's a person or department responsible for clearances. You send them the script, they send anything that didn't get cleared, and you relay that info to the showrunner and writer of the episode to come up with an alternative name for the character or thing. Bonus points if you suggest a handful of alternative names yourself, so they can focus on more important stuff. That happens a lot, where we come up with a name and it doesn't clear, and we'll just pitch to the writer of the episode 4 or 5 different names that they could use, and they'll pick one, you clear it. Oftentimes, at least on our show, we'll have new script pages come out that we're shooting the next day, so we'll have to put a rush on the clearances. So if there's a name that we just think of and write and that's shooting the next day, we will blast that to the clearances department and have them clear the name so that it's legal to, we know that it's legal to use when we're shooting it, which is pretty important. Writers Guild paperwork. I've fortunately never had to handle this sort of stuff, so I don't know exactly how it works, but check with whoever had the job before you, or script coordinator friends that you know, or production, to get the skinny on this. This is pretty important because it's what helps the writers get paid, and that's a critical thing. Very often you'll be working on set as a script coordinator and writer's assistant, since writers are the people in charge of a show. It's not a director's world, it's writers. So very often the showrunner will have his writing staff on set pitching stuff, and you'll be there taking notes or making changes on the fly. You might be stuck up in the room, but you might actually end up there every day. It really does depend on the job, but you will experience some form of life on set. Be sure to be quiet. If you've ever been on a set before, you'll notice how quiet everyone is, because you don't want to ruin a take by talking over cast. That's big no-no. As I mentioned, you'll want to type quietly if you're taking notes, especially on set. Last minute rewrites. You might be tasked with doing a last minute rewrite on set. This is stressful as hell and requires you to be lightning fast and sharp. Be ready to print a fuck ton of copies when you're done. You'll probably need an on-set printer or be able to send to someone else to print, because like I said, these are last second rewrites. They happen on the fly. You put it in the document, and then the cast wants to see the new pages immediately. So you have to be ready to print out copies, staple them, hand them off to the cast so that they can start learning these new lines. There's a lot more to learn about working on set, which unfortunately is for another lesson, because it is an important part of the job. Custodial, this is also very important, primarily for writers, PAs, and writers' assistants. Lunch pickups, timely is as important as accurate. Confer with the writers about when lunch should arrive. Sometimes it's 12:30, sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 12, sometimes they want to have it early. But check with them if there's not like a set protocol. Have lunch restaurants ready to suggest. Writers are not responsible for picking the lunch spot. You are. They can always veto the restaurant, but they shouldn't have to think about it. Get them the menu via email or print it out as early as you can so that you can get the order in as early as possible. Writers have the reputation for procrastinating, which is always fun. So sometimes they'll get their lunch order to you very late, and you'll just have to roll with that and maybe get the other orders in early so that the restaurant can start working on stuff before the last order comes in. Cleaning is important. Make sure that the writer's office and room is tidy. Make sure the table is clean. Make sure there's not junk lying around. Just because the writers are messy doesn't mean they want their surroundings to be messy. So there is a fair bit of cleaning up after them that you have to do. Grocery runs are also important to ensure they have breakfast, drinks, coffee, snacks available at all times. Occasionally, that sort of thing is taken care of by production, so confer with production to see if that's the case. But if not, writer's PA does the shopping for the office, and it can be a lot of stuff. There's usually there's cereal bars, there's lunch meat and bread and bagels and cheese and carrots and all sorts of stuff. So depending on the budget, depending on what production says your budget is, you might have to be economical with what you get, but usually writers want the option of a bunch of good snacks. Phones are important. You have to answer the phones professionally, so make sure you have a solid foundation on how to use the phones to transfer calls or dial out. No one likes being hung up on, so just learn the phones. That's one of the first things you should do, is learn the phones, learn how they operate, learn how the showrunner and the writers want to get their calls. Sometimes it's just a matter of putting them on hold, and the showrunner can pick it up in their office. Sometimes you have to actually transfer it. So just learn that stuff early on, and you'll be set on that front. There's a lot of office supply ordering. Scripts will come out in revisions. Script revisions will come out in different color paper. So the first revision is blue, the second revision is pink, then yellow, then green, and then sometimes they'll have you go into a bunch of other different colors that I can't right now remember off the top of my head. Sometimes they'll just have you revert back to white, and it'll be called double white. But it's always important to have a selection of colored paper on hand, and just consult with your predecessor or with production on what you should have stocked. The creative and the technical each get their own section later. So technical is actually right up next, so get into that now. Technical stuff, this is a big deal and a big portion of the job. It could be its own webinar, but I'll try and keep it relatively brief so we can move on. Software is a big part of it. Terminology and learning about how the writers speak is a big part of it. Internet searches is a surprisingly big part of being a writer's assistant and script coordinator. Helping writers with their technical needs and just kind of miscellaneous stuff is also important. So first things first, software. Knowing software is important. I actually worked at the Apple Store when I was in a previous life. I worked at the Apple Store, and so I have a pretty keen understanding of the machine I use and the software I use, and it's very helpful to have that strong technical foundation so that you can be as competent with this stuff as possible. Screenwriting software like Final Draft, Movie Magic, that's important. Word processing software like Word and Google Docs. Like I mentioned before, there's a online program called Synchronize. Gmail, obviously, for emailing out, and miscellaneous stuff. So first things first, Final Draft. It is not my favorite application. I want to make that perfectly clear that when I am working on my own personal stuff, I use a different screenwriting software because I've found it to be buggy, quirky, a lot of features are missing. It's not great for my own personal use, but it is the most widely used software. It really is true what they say, that it is that for professional screenwriters. Everyone uses it. It is the premier screenwriting software. If you've never used it before, buy it or find someone who has it and use it a lot. If you get hired into a writer's office, chances are you'll need to use it at some point. Every show I've been on has worked out a Final Draft and nothing else as far as screenwriting software goes. It has a lot of quirks and issues that could fill an entire other section. It's buggy. The collaboration features are terrible. The files inevitably become unstable after multiple revisions. And the revisions mode itself is really awful. It doesn't play well with copiers and printers. It lacks basic usability that makes it hard to do a lot of things. For example, when you're removing unused characters in a scene, you have to do it manually and click back and forth between two buttons, and there's no way to use the keyboard to do it. So it's just it's one of the banes of my existence, is having to remove unused characters, because it's an entire like 5-minute period that you'll never get back. The software itself is not very well laid out. It's not particularly visually appealing, and it's not well supported. I've had a number of issues with the software, and I've gotten in touch with Final Draft. They basically said, sorry, no can do. It really is the worst screenwriting software out there. Why is it so widely used then? The answer is habit. Writers use Final Draft because they've always used Final Draft. Because for a lot of writers, when they got started, that was the only option they had. I could talk for hours about how terrible the software is, but the fact of the matter is, we just have to live with that shit. That's just the nature of the job. You are going to use Final Draft in your job as a writer's assistant script coordinator. That said, there are some useful aspects of the software, and there are some nifty tips and tricks I can share to make your experience a little less shitty. There's a scene view functionality. Excuse me, let me take a drink here. You can actually view the script in scene view, which basically gives you a broad strokes, just the scene heading, the location, and the first line of action. So it kind of like helps you break it down into a very easily digestible form. That will only show scenes that have a scene header in them. So, and I've had that problem before where I broke a script down and I was wondering where a certain scene was, and I realized that the writer didn't include a normal like interior, a slug line, an interior location day. And if it doesn't have that interior location day, then it doesn't show up in the scene view. So make sure you have that. And you can also have the header, the very top line of every page of the script automatically update with whatever revision you're on. So if you turn on collated, there's a little button that says collated. If you're making a new revision and you make any changes on that page, it'll automatically at the top put like blue pages on that page. It's a little complex for people who, it's a little also abstract for people who haven't used the software, but it's a useful feature. Shortcuts, we won't go into these here, but you can customize the software or use the built-in shortcuts on your computer to make your life faster and easier. So do that. Like one of the quickest things that I do is using keyboard shortcuts that I have memorized just in my brain to kind of pull up whatever functions or menus or different view modes that I could want. Other screenwriting software like Movie Magic, Celtics, Writer Duet, which is actually the one that I use for my personal projects. A few shows use these systems. I've never used them before, so I would recommend buying a book or going online and watching a tutorial for one of those pieces of software. I personally recommend Writer Duet for personal projects. Learn Final Draft, because if you're going to be in a professional writer's office, chances are you'll have to use it. But for my personal projects, Writer Duet is my favorite. Since it's not up on the screen here, it's spelled Writer Duet, D-U-E-T. Look it up. Great software. Plug. A note on the difference between single cam comedies and multicam sitcoms. Aside from stylistic and tonal differences, there are some major differences in formatting and form that come between multicam sitcoms, which are like staged shows. A good example would be like Home Improvement, Roseanne, or Seinfeld, and single cam comedies like Veep, for instance. There's a lot to go into there, so again, look up what the difference is between multicam sitcoms and single cam. Now, also another side note, just randomly, single cam is actually kind of a misnomer, because on Veep we actually shoot with 4 cameras, but it's not a stage shoot. Multicam generally means you're shooting on a stage with 4 heavy built-in camera rigs that are movable with big wheels, and it's what they call a proscenium thing. So you're shooting all around one direction, but single cam is kind of a misnomer because Veep will shoot with 4 cameras at once. They'll just be mobile and they'll look better than multicam. Hard to describe it any other way. Microsoft Word. You've probably used Microsoft Word before, so I won't go into it. It's the most widely used note-taking software, but if it works for you and it works for the writers, you can also use Google Docs. It's useful for its autosave functionality, like I mentioned before, and its ease of sharing. It's very, very easy to collaborate inside of a Google Doc. You can work on a document at the same time if you need to, which is terrific. In both Word and Google Docs, I strongly suggest you to use different levels of headers to create a table of contents. So you can actually identify what a header is. So you can do like heading 1 and define heading 1 as being like 12-point, bold, capitalized. So you can just really quick with a keyboard shortcut make something a heading, and then at the end of the day, you can go to the top of the document, insert a table of contents that includes all headings, and it'll automatically lay out the different sections with their page number. It's really easy to navigate and helps the writers a lot. So I'd highly recommend doing that. Synchronize, which is distribution software. It's web-based, so you don't have to have a specific kind of computer or software to use it. You just go online and you can use the website, which is actually really straightforward and easy to use. It does distribution really well, among other things, like it's also capable of scheduling and other production specific tools. There's a free version of Synchronize that doesn't include all the bells and whistles that the studio version has, so sign up for it, tool around in there and get a feel for the program. It's pretty self-explanatory and makes distribution really easy. Gmail is another great tool for distribution. You can organize crew members into groups that you then just type in the group name and it'll automatically populate. Yeah, I've heard of other people using like whatever, Yahoo or Hotmail or AOL to distribute, but Gmail is a lot cleaner and easier. I recommend if you have a Yahoo account, just dishing that and getting Gmail. No offense to Yahoo. It's just, I've seen a lot of issues with that, which I haven't seen in Gmail. The easiest way to use it is, like I said, with creating custom contact groups. You can create distro lists for each thing that you have. So, you know, you can create a custom like notes distribution list, which is just the writers, or an outline distribution list, which is the writers in the studio or whatever, table read, shooting script, etc. Other useful software, and this is all, obviously, since this is recorded, you can go back and review this, but I highly recommend checking out some of this stuff because it's really, really useful. The first I'll mention is Dropbox, which is obviously, you know, cloud services shared storage, which is great for collaboration, especially if you're sharing stuff between you and the other script coordinator or you and the writer's assistant. Just make sure one person is out of a document before another person opens it, or else you'll run into all sorts of problems with the file saving. It'll become messy. It's really easy. Just communicate with your other person and say, hey, I'm going to this document, don't have it open. Flycut is something that's not very well known. It's magic, it really is. If you're doing a lot of copying and pasting, it allows you to copy multiple things and choose between them when you decide to paste. So how it works is you copy something, and the little fly cut icon at the top of your screen, you can go into it and you'll see all of the different things that you've copied in the past, which is super useful. If that's unclear, let me know, but basically it holds a history of everything you copy, like up to 100 entries. I was on a show, a little story about that. I was on a show and we'd taken something like 20 pages of notes that day, and then the computer crashed and we hadn't saved anything. Actually, it might have been the software. I think it was Word that crashed. But fortunately, at some point, we'd copied all of the text in a document to move it over into another doc. And because we had Flycut enabled, we were able to paste it into a document, thus saving a day of work. It was like, we'd never had such like heart clench to relief in such a short period of time, but it really is a useful tool, and it's free. I think it's free. It might be like $2 or $3 actually now, but it's worth it. It's well worth it to get it. It's called Flycut. Remember that. Very useful. I use something called Better Snap Tool, which is a very simple tool that aligns a window to, like, it automatically snaps it to the top half or bottom half or left or right of the screen, so that you have an easy way to like organize your windows. I think that's free. There are other software. There's other software you can use to do that functions the same way. There's an app called Caffeine, which is a very simple plugin that keeps your computer awake when activated. So when you have the caffeine icon active, your computer won't automatically go to sleep even if there's no activity on it, which is useful for a number of purposes. Like if you don't want your computer to go to sleep when you take a break, for instance, you want to come back and start working right away. There's an application called Things, which is available for your Mac, iPad, and iPhone. I think it's also available on Android and Windows machines too. It's a to-do list, but any notes application will also kind of serve the same purpose. Keep track of all your tasks, because as a script coordinator, as a writer's assistant, that stuff piles up, and you will let things fall through the cracks. Keyboard shortcuts are very, very useful. I'm not going to list everything here, but I will just say that knowing keyboard shortcuts, both in applications and for the operating system itself, will save you lots and lots of time and make you seem like more of an expert than you probably are. So look up keyboard shortcuts, learn keyboard shortcuts, memorize them, and use them. Also know that you can customize new keyboard shortcuts using the menu item inside of Mac's system preferences. That means that, let's say that there's a menu item in Final Draft that says Scene View, which is something I explained earlier. I have gone into the Mac's system preferences and gone to the keyboard shortcuts apps define which app it's in use for, Final Draft specifically, and then given a custom keyboard shortcut, which I think is Command Alt Shift S, so that when I need to go into scene view, I can just do that really quick. And or no, I'm sorry, I think I did it D and E. So regular view is E and scene view is D. So I can just really quick toggle back and forth between the two. It's useful. It's really, really useful to learn that stuff and make new combinations of keyboard shortcuts so you can do things really quickly. It seems really like unprofessional to, when you're copying, pasting, going edit, copy, edit, paste. It's Command C and Command V for Mac, and I think Control C and Control V for Windows. Your best friend is Command S to save. They call it the Apple tick. It's just like constantly Apple S, Command S, Command S, Command S, so that you're constantly saving. But now that auto save is a thing, that becomes less critical, but just know that you can do that really quickly with that command. Finally on to the next section, terminology. There's a lot of writer's room terminology that you're just gonna have to learn on the fly because a lot of people use different things, but the biggest that I've seen that I wasn't aware of or couldn't piece together just from context were STET and TK. STET means as is. So when someone says STET the next 2 pages, that means that you will keep the next 2 pages the same and just skip over those when you're doing revisions. TK is a caret, what they call a caret. It's like putting a pin in it. It's something to revisit. It's used because the combination of T and K is not common letter pairing. So if you're searching for it within a script, you can search for TK and not get other results. So it's something to come back to. There's a whole glossary of this stuff that you can look up. These are just 2 examples of phrases whose meanings weren't immediately evident by their names or usage. And like I said, not easily evident piecing it together with context. Internet searches are a big portion of the job. Surprisingly big portion of the job. Sometimes it's just a dumb video that the writers want to watch to laugh at. Sometimes it's a news story. Sometimes it's the score of Game 3 of the World Series, and occasionally it's something relevant to the story or writing or the production process. But at some point you'll have to do this. You'll do a lot of Google image searches, perhaps for faces of actors or actresses the writers are considering for a role. Be ready at any given moment to search for something and throw it up on the screen. When the room goes on a tangent about a person or asks a question about a fact or figure, it's nice to have it ready on the screen. You'll get the hang of it. You just have to learn to read the room. If they're in the middle of an intense writing session and they go off on a tangent, maybe not the best time to pull up stuff on the internet to distract them further. But you know, typically when they're just doing a regular notes session and they're yammering about something, and we're curious about someone's birthday or how old someone is or what someone looks like, it's nice to have that ready and have a keyboard shortcut also for putting that image on the screen if you've done that thing that I mentioned earlier and hidden your notes so that they can't see it. Another thing you'll do, there's some other stuff is helping the writers. You know, you don't have to have worked at the Apple Store to learn some neat tips and tricks to impress the writers. Maybe we'll do a deep dive into the tech side of things in a separate webinar. There's a lot of ground to cover here, and it could be its own course, but that's for another day. There's other stuff like learning the basics of networking. You should know what an IP address is, and if you don't, you should look it up. It's pretty straightforward. Printers and copiers, learn how to set them up. That's very important because you're going to be doing a lot of printing and you're going to be helping the writers do printing as well. File types, learn the basics on how to use file types. Sometimes if a file isn't opening, simply changing the file type, which is the 3-letter suffix at the end of the file name, will change how the file behaves and what app it wants to open in. So I've done stuff before where a file has come in and I literally just changed the last 3 letters of the file name and fixed any problems we were having with it. Changing gears, pitching. this is kind of the creative aspect of the job. It's both fun and scary. Perhaps the most fun and exciting and terrifying part of the job. No one likes pitching a joke that falls flat on its face, but everyone loves it when one of their pitches gets a big laugh. We'll dispense with the formalities and assume you have the guts to pitch to a room full of writers and you've been given the approval to do so by the showrunner, either implicitly or explicitly. Here's how to pitch. So first of all, find the right moment. Get a feel for the room. If the mood is somber or tense, maybe hold off on joke pitching until it's less so. Be specific. Think of a specific pitch. Don't speak in vague generalities that will never go over well. Don't say like, I'll go into that a little bit later. Visualize the pitch. Hear it in your head. Get the exact wording right. Sometimes there are no second, well, actually often, I would say more often than not, there are no second chances in pitches. Once the pitch is out there in the world, it's out there. Practice the delivery of the pitch in your head. Imagine how you plan on pitching it. Time the pitch. Wait for an appropriate break in the conversation. Don't talk over someone else's pitch. That's rude, especially for the writer's assistant and script coordinator, and even for other writers as well. Writers will get pissed off if you talk over them, even if you are another writer. Deliver your pitch clearly and loudly enough to hear. Be confident. Don't shy away from the pitch or apologize for it. If you're gonna do it, then do it right and do it confidently. Here's another thing that people don't tell you, but don't laugh at your own joke. That's what assholes do, and you're not an asshole, right? I think if the joke kills, stop while you're ahead, unless you have another killer pitch lined up. If the joke bombs, don't take it too hard and don't give up. Pitching is really tough, but if you're good at it, you'll get the hang of it. And it's a great feeling to watch something you thought of get shot on set and aired on TV. I know that I've ended up with stuff that went into Veep and ended up on screen, and it's a great feeling of pride that I have pitched something that ended up on such a great show, and essentially beating out the other writers for that joke, which is also a good feeling in and of itself. It's very well worth the terror and the inevitable failures you'll experience. Don't worry about bombing. Everybody bombs, even the writers. Just keep going, learn from the failed pitches, and improve. I'll give you an example of a good pitch and a bad pitch. A bad pitch. So here goes. Then, just when character X thinks they're out of the woods, something or someone catches them. That pitch is bad because it's unspecific, it's vague, it's not particularly original. A better, but still kind of bad pitch, the main character gets away from the police. He's hiding in an alleyway, and then he hears the whoop whoop of a squad car. It's good because it's more specific than that previous example, but it's bad because it's trite and cliche, and we've kind of all seen that before. I don't have an example of a good pitch because it really depends on the context of what you're pitching, but you'll get the hang of it. It's just a matter of kind of reading the room, seeing what the other writers pitch, and kind of practicing that form. And speaking of practicing, it's really like pitching is an art form, and it takes a lot of practice. So don't shy away from that practice, but also don't slow the room down with a bunch of shitty pitches. I mean, like if you're on a roll of bad pitches, just quit, stop, take a break, take a breather, take a little time off, cool your jets a little bit. Responding to other writers' pitches is also a big part of the job. You don't have to laugh at every pitch that the writers throw out there, but you're encouraged to if something's funny. And here's an important fact that a lot of people won't talk about, but very important. Never give audible commentary or criticism on another writer's pitch. It sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised. I've seen people do this. Saying womp womp after a bad pitch is the perfect example of what not to do in a room that will get you fired or otherwise reprimanded. So don't do that shit. A note on room bits. Like I mentioned earlier, room bits are things that will never end up in the script. Don't get dragged into them. It's usually really funny and people are laughing along, but stuff that won't make it onto the air is not part of your job. Ultimately, it's a sidetrack. The writers, of course, are free to go off course, play around, and exercise creative and comedic freedom, but don't get sucked into that with them. This can be a huge time suck, and you do not want to be part of the problem. Stressful parts of the job, which they do exist, folks. The being in a writer's room is pretty stressful. Often in creative professions, you have to work with big personalities, read assholes, and difficult people, read even bigger assholes. If you're lucky, you'll get yelled at and or humiliated a few times over the course of a season, and only a few times over the course of the season. Part of the job is just putting up with their craziness without going crazy yourself. And don't take it personally. They do act this way towards everyone. Sometimes it's a matter of someone just being stressed out and snapping at you, which is like, that's fine because there's a lot of stress coming down on them, and they take it out on someone, and that's part of how it goes. Just don't take it personally. It's not the end of the world if you get snapped at by either a producer or a writer or cast or someone. It's not that big of a deal. Sometimes though, your job is just to get shit on and pretend you love it. Which brings us to our next topic, how to get shit on and pretend you love it. Remember why you're here. You're in a writer's room, you're working towards being that because you love it, because it's a fun environment. You're making connections in TV that could possibly get you your first writing job. You're learning, you're growing, and you're toughening. Just look at the abuse as character building and skin hardening. And you should also just know that it's just TV. You're not a heart surgeon. You're not a landmine remover. In the moment when you're getting snapped at, of course, that may seem irrelevant, but just take a deep breath and think about the great parts of the job, of which there are many. Writers are cool, you know? If and when the showrunner yells at you in front of everyone for a relatively inconsequential thing, chances are the writers sympathize with you and have your back. And just as equally, chances are the showrunner's not actually mad at you. They are just, you know, enduring the stresses of their job, and you know, they feel the pressure, they feel the tension. And I've had it before where I've been snapped at, and then 10 minutes later, it's very friendly and congenial, and you know, the showrunner will take my pitch, and you know, it's all copacetic. If the writers are not on your side and you feel like there's a lot of like antipathy there, it maybe considering getting another gig, because it might not be the best place for you, or it might not be the best fit. I've been fortunate enough to work with, you know, writers and showrunners that I truly love spending time with and that I think respect me and like working with me. So I have, you know, particularly on Veep, I love the showrunner, I love the writers. They're all terrific people, and they do amazing work, which is part of the reason I love the job so much, is because I am in such a high level place for TV comedy. So next steps. There are next steps after getting into the writer's office as a writer's assistant or script coordinator, and that's something that I myself am working on day to day. I'm looking towards making those next steps into becoming a paid writer or getting a script, which are sometimes parts of the job, and sometimes they don't come easily and they don't come quickly, but you just have to be patient and work through it. We're not at the conclusion yet. How do you parlay your career as a writer's assistant or script coordinator into landing a job as a staff writer? I couldn't tell you because I haven't done it yet. And I say yet because I am working with writers that I trust and know and like, and believe that will give me opportunities to potentially do that in the future. But with any endeavor, creative or not, luck, like I said, favors the prepared. I like to say ABC, always be co-writing. Write your own stuff, help friends write their stuff, give them jokes and pitches. This not only gives you practice writing, it also gives you samples to show the writers on your show whenever they're ready to read it. If the writers aren't assholes, they'll read your stuff and help you out in whatever way they can, which has fortunately been my experience on Veep. They've been terrific. They've given me notes. They've helped make my writing better. Show your talents by giving the writers good pitches that they use in scripts. If you demonstrate that you can pitch stuff as good as any of the writers, they'll start to see you as one. Be good at your job, but also don't be too good at your job. You don't want to get pigeonholed into being a writer's assistant forever if you're really good at the job and they just don't want to bring anyone else on. It's a fine line and it's not the easiest, but it's important to position yourself as a writer when you're ready to take that next step, to position yourself as a writer as opposed to a script coordinator or writer's assistant. This is important. You should not expect to become a writer overnight. Sometimes you have to take the win of getting rehired for another season or having one of the writers hire you onto a show that they work on or refer you to another show as a script coordinator or writer's assistant. Getting asked back is nothing to sneeze at, and you should take it if that's what you're getting. Getting a script. I've never been fortunate enough to get a script, but the rules are pretty simple. You have to maintain the tone and style of the show, follow the outline that's been given to you, and make it your own. While you shouldn't stray too far from the source material in the outline, and you shouldn't go off the rails, you are expected to add your own flourishes, jokes, and fun moments. It shouldn't be a dry retread of what was in the outline. That's not what showrunners are looking for. It's not what writers are looking for. They're looking for you to bring your own personality and your own sense of comedy and story into the document that they gave you. Do not be afraid to ask for help from the other writers. They will be more than happy to give you assistance on the script that you're writing. Aside from that, good luck, Godspeed. It's a big step to get a script. So do your best and ask for help when you can. Very important towards taking the next steps is taking risks. This is a big one. I cannot underscore enough the importance of putting yourself out there. None of the writers you're working with got there because they played it safe. They had to put themselves out on a limb. They had to show their work to others, which is scary, and they took risks. So you should too. Show your material to the writers. They will be, for the most part, happy to read it. And if not, then maybe it's, again, not the best fit for you. Make sure to pitch in the room, pitch on set, not just jokes, but story ideas, anything that you think will improve the show. While not every pitch will be lauded as gold, they will appreciate the effort you're making. So in conclusion, this is the fun part. This is where you get to take all this knowledge that I've shared over my years of service in this profession, and you get to play with it. Take it home, mull it over, strategize a game plan, work on your resume, work on your material, work on your social skills if you have none, network and meet people, put feelers out for jobs in the industry, and apply again somewhere else. And relax, it's just show business. So now we will open it up for some questions, I think, if that's on the game plan for today, Amanda.
Yep, definitely. I love it. Relax. It's just show business.
Yeah.
I love it. This was amazing, John. I mean, really, just getting down to the nitty gritty, like I said earlier, it's just so helpful because I think, for those of us who, have our ideas of what the room is like and what it's actually like, I mean, you're really peeling it back and exposing the fact that it's not all, fun and games and glamorous. I mean, there's definitely a lot of work that goes into it all around.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, definitely. And we've had quite a few questions come in here.
Great.
So I'm going to get started here. And I know that you've been I'll keep it brief because I know that you've been talking for so long.
Sure.
And you guys, if anybody wants to raise their hand to ask John a question out loud, feel free to do so. It would be just the little hand raise feature that's on your GoToWebinar control panel. I'm happy to do that if anyone wants to talk out loud. But let's just get started and I'll get to just a few questions here. All right. I've got a question here from Jordan, and Jordan wants to know, how does the changeover happen? For example, if you get bumped from an assistant to a coordinator or a coordinator to a writer, is it a formal process that you go through, or do you just kind of come in one day and get promoted?
I mean, it's never like that. It's never like you're there the next day and oh look, I have a new job. Um, as far as a staff writer, it happens different ways. So I've seen it happen where, it's been a formal conversation between the showrunner and the studio, and a lower level assistant gets promoted for one reason or another. They like their material, etc. As far as script coordinator, writer's assistant goes, it's typically if a script coordinator is leaving or taking another job or something like that, the writer's assistant is usually the first person considered to fill that role of script coordinator. So getting bumped from writer's assistant or writer's PA to writer's assistant to script coordinator is typically has to do with a vacancy that is being filled. So as far as staff writer, it's going to happen any number of ways. I mean, it's never like this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to be. You're going to be a script coordinator, and then you're going to be a staff writer next season. I've heard that promise be made, but it never as clean as that, because you just don't know. You don't know if the show is going to come back for another season. Even if you have been offered that as an option. As far as script coordinator, writer's assistant, and the script coordinator though, it's typically very it's based on who has the job and who's leaving and who wants to fill it.
All right, excellent. There's not a magic handbook.
No, definitely no. It's very catch as catch can.
All right, perfect. I have a question here from Sarah, and Sarah wants to know, oh, actually, Sarah says, thank you very much for this webinar. This has been great. And Sarah said, do you need a manager or agent to get a job in a writer's room?
Before I answer that question, I'm going to move my cat out of the room because he's causing all sorts of trouble.
No problem.
Nobody. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Sarah had thanked you for the webinar. She really enjoyed it, and then she asked you, do you need a manager or an agent to get a job in the writer's room?
As a script coordinator or writer's assistant, you do not. And I've definitely seen cases of people even becoming staff writers before having an agent or a manager. But typically, once you get to that staff writer level, you're going to want to have an agent, at least an agent, to negotiate your contract, for instance. But as far as being a script coordinator or writer's assistant, I know very few writer's assistants or script coordinators who have agents or managers. It is always helpful to have when you're ready to take that next step, but you don't need it to get into the room. And when you're a staff writer, you almost always need an agent to negotiate that stuff. And honestly, it's easy to find an agent when you become a staff writer, because that just means that they're taking, I think, 10% of your, it's either 10 or 15, I forget which. They're taking 10% of your salary home. So you just say, I'd like an agent, please. Someone to take 10% of my paycheck every week. And they'll be like, sure, if you're working on a show, you're going to be employed for 6 months. Yeah, I'll take 10% of your paycheck every week for representing you. So it's typically easy to find once you become a staff writer, and not necessary, but also not easy to find when you are a script coordinator, writer's assistant.
Awesome. All right, I've got a question here from Erica, and Erica wants to know, what might help you stand out in an interview if you don't have a lot of experience? Or if your experience is more on the writing side, like, say, writing in network showcases, or as you mentioned, performing somewhere like UCB?
make sure to have that stuff on your resume. That's something they definitely do look at. In an interview, you want to prove yourself as first and foremost personable and amiable and likable and funny and, you know, relax. You know, the alarm bells go off, red lights go off when you're in an interview with someone hoping to be a writer's assistant, writer's PA, whatever, and they're tense and they can't. You can tell that they're not relaxed, and their body language says that they're not relaxed, and how they speak says that they're not relaxed. And that's going to translate into very poor performance inside of a writer's office that can get kind of tense. So in the interview, I would say be relaxed, be positive, but not like manic, and just have fun. Because I think first and foremost, writers are looking to bring someone into the room that they can have a good time with and have fun with, and not be constrained or tense around, because, you know, that's to no one's benefit, right? I think the writers like me because I don't bring tension to the room, and that will actually constrain the creative process if I'm, you know, tense or, you know, feel like under the gun. So be cool.
I love it. Okay, I've got a question here from Slay, and Slay wants to know, he says, "Hi, John. This has been a great webinar. Thank you." He said, "I'm a stand-up comedian. How do you go about inviting writers or showrunners to attend your stand-up gig?"
Um, I can speak to personal experience. One of our writers PAs, who's now a staff writer on the show, she does stand-up comedy as well, and you know, she would just invite people in the room. She'd invite people in person. She'd send out emails to the writers and see if they wanted to come to her show. And she was never pushy about it, but she always made sure to let them know that she was doing this thing, and it's something that they could see, and kind of like prove her comedy chops, which is a great way to do it. But yeah, just be open about it, and, you know, maybe give it a little time when you first start in a writer's office. You know, give it a few weeks before you make the invitation, but make it be known in the interview and early on that you do comedy. And I guarantee someone, if you tell people that, they'll say, "Oh, let me know if you're having a show sometime. I'll come and check it out." And that's your invitation to, when you do have a show, invite them to be there for it. And like I said, you can do it in person, you can do it over email. They take no offense to that sort of stuff, and they're usually pretty encouraging.
Excellent. And Slay actually, he typed in, he said, "I meant for someone like me who's not in a writer's room where I don't have any connections to get noticed."
Gotcha. Understood. Yeah, I mean, invite whoever you can. Like, that's the thing. You make the connections in the industry, invite people that you know who work in the industry, invite friends, invite, you know, friends of family, invite people uh, who like comedy. And you know, if it's not getting you that job in the writer's office, then think of another. I mean, keep doing comedy, obviously, but think of another path to work your way in, because it's not necessarily a comedy show that's going to convince a showrunner or writer um, to hire you. So think about ways to work your way in, and then once you have that in, invite people in your personal life and in the writer's office to those shows. It kind of goes back to, you know, finding the job in the first place. The way that you get there is going to be different every time, but just be open to those experiences and open to those interviews, and then invite whoever you know to these comedy shows. Because, you know, if you're good, then you may bypass the entire writer's assistant script coordinator process entirely and just go straight to, I'm a good comedy person and I have a sample and I can be hired as a staff writer right off the bat. That's happened before. There have been ways to bypass the script coordinator writer's assistant thing. It's just a lot of learning on the fly once you get there. But yeah.
That's actually funny because my next question here is from Christopher, and Christopher said, he said, it seems like there is a lot of administrative duties when breaking in, more than I
Mhm.
ever realized. And he said, can you ever just advance to being a writer?
If you could, I would have done it a while ago because it is a very well-paid job and it's a very fun job and it allows you to focus on the creative aspects of things without doing the administrative stuff. But honestly, I think that I have benefited in both skill and character by being in the room doing this administrative stuff, doing this clerical stuff, being an assistant essentially. And I think that skipping over that process is to the detriment of the work you do. Because I am doing both the job of a writer's assistant and script coordinator, and to some extent, doing the job of a writer by pitching and by continually writing when I have free time off. I believe that I am building that toughness and building that resolve to keep going. And when I'm not working on this job, when I have time off, I'm very, very productive because, if I could write while I was doing this really, you know, long hours, low paid job, I certainly can write when I have time off. So while there have been instances where I've seen people bypass the writer's assistant script coordinator uh, job, I, I personally wouldn't because I think it's given me the kind of connections that are helping me right now and will help in the future, um, but also have conditioned me to being a better writer and a better worker in general.
All right, excellent. The next question I have here, it's from Michael, and Michael wants to know if you, it's back to networking, and he said, if you do meet someone and you follow up with an email,
Mhm.
do you send them a video you wrote, or do you send the actual script?
Um, Sometimes neither. If it is just like if you are talking about just getting a job in a writer's room, if you are pitching something to them and saying like this is something I've made, um, and the email is about that, then you send the video, send the finished product, because I've found more and more these days people expect not just words on a page. They want to see that the words on the page that you've written can translate into something tangible and something that is digestible and easy to grasp. And if they just get a script, then it's a little bit amorphous. It's a little bit like, what does this actually look like? But if you can demonstrate what it looks like, then that gives you an advantage over someone who just sends words on a page. That's my advice. If you have something made of a script, then do that. If you have something made and a different story that's just in script form, feel free to send both if you feel like that invitation is there. But make sure that you know that that invitation is actually there, because sometimes people don't have the time or energy to read, a 30-page script, a 40-page script, and they're going above and beyond just by like watching whatever 5-minute thing that you've created. So just make sure you kind of play it by ear and determine whether or not someone wants this material in the first place. And if they do, then give them whatever your best stuff is. If it's a finished piece and a script, send them both of them.
All right, I've got a question here, another question from Jordan. Jordan wants to know, can you write a spec script to get considered for the room? And if so, how do you get it into the hands of the showrunner? I'm not connected, so this seems impossible to me.
Everything in entertainment seems impossible until it actually happens. I'll say that right off the bat. There's no reason in the world that anyone should have a job where they write dick jokes for a living and get paid lots and lots of money to do it. There's no reason in the world to think that you could turn 30 pages of written words into a groundbreaking masterpiece that happens on screen. Um, it all seems impossible until it's happening. So take that into consideration first and foremost. As far as spec material, um, typically I would advise against, I mean, if this was 20 years ago, specs were kind of the standard, and you would give a spec script of a show to the showrunner or one of the writers. Now people want to see original material. If you're submitting a spec script to a show that exists, chances are you can't do it any better than the writers that have done it already. And that's something that a lot of writers will actually like. I can't think of a good analogy right now, but they have the ideal version already in production, and they write the ideal version, they write the version that they like. Beating that is really, really difficult. But if you can come up with an original screenplay, an original pilot that you write, they'll be more inclined to be receptive to something like that because it is because it shows that you're capable of not just taking other people's characters and adapting it into a different storyline, but you can come up with characters of your own, come up with a storyline of your own, and make it an actual script. As far as getting it into the hands of a showrunner, don't focus on that right now. Like, focus on getting it into the hands of, if you don't have those kinds of connections, focus on getting it into the hands of friends and family, getting notes, improving your writing. If you know anyone in the industry, a producer, an assistant, whoever, share with them. There's a lot of assistants in this business, and so many of them are on the path to becoming agents or producers or showrunners themselves. And you just have to find those connections through networking events and get the scripts in their hands. Because, I mean, even though they're not like the highest level, the highest echelon, they might be one day, and they might also be able to pass it on to their boss. So don't focus on getting the script into the hands of a showrunner. It is very hard. And I work on a show, and I'm close with the showrunner on the show, and he's offered to read my stuff, but it's like, now wouldn't be possible because we're so busy with the stuff he's focused on. He's not gonna have the time to read it, and I know him personally. So if it's that hard for me to do it at this given time, then it's going to be really, really hard for someone else to do it. So just focus on getting it into the hands of people in the industry, whether or not they're in positions of power. Because the worst thing that could happen is someone says no. The second worst thing that can happen is someone will give you notes that are constructive and make your writing better. But I would definitely suggest taking the pilot approach as opposed to the spec script approach, because you're going up against really heavy hitters when you're putting your spec script against stuff that's actually been produced, and chances are it won't measure up, no matter how good of a writer you are.
I love that you're being real about that. I love that. Um, and I mean, it's definitely true. And it was funny, you would put that bullet point earlier on in your presentation about networking in Stage 32. But that's exactly why we created this community. And you guys, Jonathan's part of the community, and that's why we created this platform, to be able to connect everybody. And it starts with that first introduction on how are you going to you know how are you going to be able to start a relationship. So
Right.
so true. Two questions, then we'll let you go. First one,
Great.
I'm actually going to blend two questions that came in. Someone wanted to know if they could ever volunteer in a writer's room as an internship, unpaid. And then there was one on the other end of the spectrum where Kenneth was asking if he said, I understand that you're vague about the salary, but when do you reach a six-figure salary in a writer's room?
Uh, Both good questions. I actually did do like a brief internship thing in the writer's room of the Big C when I first moved to Los Angeles. I was working in production as their PA slash like producer's assistant there. Where production was actually centered in Connecticut, and I was living in New York at the time. We commute every day up to Connecticut, and got to know the producer very, very well. And producer put me in touch with the writers and the showrunner over there and the showrunner's assistant, and they allowed me to sit in on a couple days of writing, and it was like 2 days, maybe 3, and I got the feeling that they didn't actually really want me there, but I put it on my resume as like a writer's internship. It's pretty rare to be able to find that, and typically you have to have an in with the writers to in order to actually get there. So work in production helps. Working as a PA in production helps getting that in with the writers and letting you sit. We've invited on Veep. We've invited Julia Louis-Dreyfus's assistant into the room to sit there. One of the executive producer's assistants more than welcome to sit in on the room and watch the writing process unfold. And so, normally if you know the people there or know someone who knows them, then you can get an in and sit in on the process. That said, it's not easy when you're coming from outside unless you know someone there, which goes back to the point about networking. As far as the 6-figure salary question, I would love that myself. That would be terrific. I'm going to have to live with a 5-figure salary for the time being, but when you get to be a staff writer, I mean, this is public knowledge and easy to look up. The base salary for a staff writer on a 30-minute comedy television show is $5,100 a week. So 20 weeks of that, and you've crossed the 6-figure threshold. That's 5 months of work as a staff writer. So as soon as you make that jump to staff writer, 6 figures is not just well within reach, it's very easy to reach. But I mean, it's important to kind of like not think of it that way. Don't be focused on the amount of money that writers earn. I would say it's more important to focus on the work that they do and try and make that your work. Try and really internalize what a writer's job is and do that, because that's the fun part of the job. The fun part of the job isn't getting the paycheck. The fun part of the job is being in a room, pitching a joke and getting a huge laugh, and then having that thing shot. And I've done that as a script coordinator. And watch something get shot, and it brings me the sense of joy that no 6-figure check could provide. Although now that I think of it, probably could imagine it.
I love it. I love it. All right, final question here, and I'm going to paraphrase this. This is from Erica, and basically, it looks like Erica's background has been in corporate America and journalism, so her skills don't necessarily, on paper, her skills may not necessarily translate to like a typical entry level for a writer's room. But she said that I don't want them to worry that they'll think I would take a less paying job and then would quit if something better came along. How do I convince them that I would give the job 200%? And can you give any tips to convey that in an interview?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's not necessarily true what you said about your job skill set not applying to that of a writer in a room. I would say a good portion of the people on Veep have that kind of background. One of our executive producers, Frank Rich, was the theater critic for the New York Times, and now he's a journalist for New York Magazine, and we appreciate and relish any kind of journalistic insight that people provide. We often have journalists come and act as consultants on our show, so that's not a very hard leap to imagine. And the second part of that, 200%, I would say being enthusiastic about the job is a very big component of that. You can convince someone if you're excited about it without being overeager, which is, I know, a tough balance to strike. But if you're excited about it without being overeager, then you can very easily convince people that you're willing to give the job 200%. Because if you're saying, this is my favorite show, I love this, I love what you guys do, and even if it's not your favorite show, which I'm very fortunate that Veep was my favorite show when I first joined, But even if it's not, you can find aspects of a show. If you get an interview with a show, watch the show, watch multiple episodes of it, find something you like about it, and latch onto that, and tell them why you're so enthusiastic about that part of the show. If it's the characterization or the jokes or whatever, um, bring that up in the interview and tell them that you're so excited to be considered for the job because you love this and that aspect of the show. Which I'm sure you'll find concrete examples of when you first are in the interview. I mean, I worked at Nickelodeon. I worked on a show called Game Shakers, which has since been canceled. But when I first got the interview, I watched episodes of it was a new show, so I didn't have any examples of the actual show itself, but I watched stuff from I've watched other shows that the showrunner created and found aspects of those shows that I really enjoyed, namely the kind of like irreverent, weird, madcap, slapstick humor that he employed. And I brought that up in the interview, and I said, I love this about his shows, and I would love to work on a show that has those elements of comedy in it. And I got the job, and it was it wasn't a lie. I didn't watch the show. I don't watch the show regularly when it was on the air, but it wasn't a lie when I said, I love these aspects of the show, and that's probably a big part of what got me the job in the first place. So, hope that answers that.
No, I think that was great. That was great. And, Jonathan, you've been so generous with your time. So I'm going to make that question the last question. And and I just want to say thank you for coming in and teaching. And you guys, if you did enjoy this, please type it into the questions box and I'll read it out loud. Do you have any last minute parting advice or any pieces of motivation you could give to everybody in the room?
Yeah, you know, I started in entertainment in 2009 was when I got my first internship in New York. And since getting my first internship in New York in 2009, I tried to get a writer's room job. I was like desperately trying to push my way into a writer's room. And it took a long time. And it wasn't until 2015 that I got my first job in a writer's room. But I stayed with it, and I know now that it's the same thing with being a writer. Like, as hard as it is to imagine right now when you're on the ground doing this stuff that I'm doing, I know it's only a matter of time before I become a paid writer. And keeping at it and practicing and working every day and working your ass off is a big component of it. And I'll say that Hollywood is very much a war of attrition. A lot of people come into the business and they want to be a certain thing, and then they give up after 2 years. And it's a matter of patience, and it's a matter of effort, and it's a matter of being tough and working through the challenges of not getting that job or not getting that interview or not getting that meeting, and just keep going, because it's advice I really shouldn't be sharing with all of you. It's kind of it puts me at a competitive disadvantage when other people have that drive to keep going. But I figure you guys have earned it after sitting through these 2 hours. But yeah, just don't give up. That's not what's going to get you there. It takes time, and just be aware of that and be patient, but also be driven and look for those opportunities and grab them when they come. That would be I guess my parting advice.
I love it. And I love that Hollywood is a war of attrition.
Yeah.
That's a great quote and it's so true. Um, John, people have just been typing in thank you. There's so many thank yous in here and really great job.
Thank you
Um,
guys.
Thank you so much for offering this class. Getting a real look behind the curtain is so helpful. Balancing expectations, love your attitude and keeping at it. Great advice. And Michael says, thanks for a great webinar and say hi to your cat for me.
I will. I'll say hi to Rox once I let him in the door.
The show must go on. It's Hollywood, baby, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, John. Well, thank you again for everything. And everybody in the room, I'm going to get this converted so you'll have it in your Stage 32 account in about 48 hours. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody on Stage 32, where we have over 120,000 discussions going on about the industry right now. And Jonathan's a part of it, so feel free to connect with him on there. All right, John, thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.